Hi, welcome to the Tuned and Strong podcast. I am Angela McCuiston of Music Strong and joined by my lovely co-host, Dr. Jen Cabas of Tuned and Toned Performance. And today we are joined by a special guest, Mr. Chase Akers. Hello.
Hey, y'all. Jen, Angela, thanks for having me on. Really excited to talk to both of you.
Welcome.
We are delighted to have you here. So we're just going to dive into this today. And I found Chase on Facebook, I think it was, and then I followed you on Instagram. And you've got a couple different platforms that you're using, but tell us a little about you and your what you do in the industry, that kind of thing, your backstory.
Yeah, absolutely. I come from a musical family from my dad. My mom is not musical at all. So people say like musical family, they think, family band, but nothing at all like that. I have been doing music, been playing, performing since I was probably 10 or 11. My dad, Tim Akers, is a producer and arranger, player as well. Who's had a very long career in the session world, in the live world, coming up on, almost 40 years. So he's made quite a name for himself in Nashville, and recently in the last decade has really reinvented himself with YouTube fame for his band, Tim Akers and the Smoking
Section. And the Smoking Section, right?
Yeah, right. So you're familiar.
I actually have a friend of mine that, a couple friends of mine that played in his band, and that's how I got to know, and I know several of them. Josh Scalf.
Who?
Josh Scalf, he plays trombone.
Yep, I know Josh.
Yeah, and his roommate at the time, Nick Haynes, and his illustrious session player, dad or uncle, I don't remember, Mike Haynes.
Yeah.
Everybody knows Mike, apparently.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
I don't know if Roy Agee was in that band either.
Roy sat in for Barry Green quite a few down the road. We get Roy. The funny thing about Roy is he's so busy himself. So it's like we have a deep bench of subs, but it's like they're all, touring and doing stuff in their own right. So it's kind of like we have to have multiple subs for each member. But yeah, coming from music in the genes, it's funny how I've watched my dad kind of reinvent himself over the last decade, and I'm going, man, you like approached retirement and said, no, I'd get bored. I want to keep going, and he's reached kind of international fame with all the cover videos and stuff like that. So my background, I mean, obviously, grew up in studios, grew up being around it, so it seemed kind of natural to go into that world, even though I didn't really know where I was going to land until I was in my mid-teens. I grew up playing jazz piano, guitar, took trumpet in elementary school up through high school, and so a few different instruments. And something happened, about age 13 to 15, and kind of broadened my musical palette, started listening to more electronic music, more hip hop, more world music, everything. You grow up being a guitar player, you learn the classic rock, you learn maybe some jazz and Joe Pass and all, Django and all that stuff. But then I guess a page turned and I suddenly got really into production, and that's where I landed, was making tracks. And I, as a teenager, I would take records that I really liked and try to copy the production style exactly like I heard it. And I thought, well, I don't have anyone else to play these parts, so I might as well just learn how to play the parts, whether it's keys, guitar, whatever, program the drums, So that's kind of where I've been. I just kind of put my nose to the grindstone in high school and didn't stop. As far as the music industry goes, I guess the better question would be, it's not what do you do, but what do people seek you out for would be the better question. I do many things, but some of those things are planting seeds for money to be made or products to be made years down the road. What people seek me out for is track production and guitar playing, background vocals, stuff like that.
Got it. So you're sitting behind a soundboard a lot.
Yeah, I'm sitting behind the desk a lot. I never really wanted to go the artist route. That was, I mean, I've written music, released music, but I always felt happier kind of working, getting to hire the team and being in that production role. If that makes sense. Somewhere along the line, I became a DJ and didn't stop because it was fun and the money was good. So
Who's the
that's
second DJ we've interviewed, or who has a history with being a DJ? Yeah.
who was the other one?
Coach Yannick, who lives in Germany. A minute.
Gotcha.
Yeah, he's a really neat dude. His name is Yannick, and don't ask me his last name because I do not remember it. Yannick. But he's also a bass player, and so he talked about going from Beethoven to techno, house, pub music, and jazz. You know, like doing all the things. And you know, we had a fun conversation about the hierarchy and whatever. And then he got into DJing and stuff. Neat guy, really neat guy. And then he got into strength training, and that's where he's landed.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing too, because people talk about like, well, do you do music and DJing and blah blah blah? How do the two come together? But I think having been a DJ for just over a decade now, I think the most interesting thing is if you grow up as a player and you have that experience playing, producing, whatever, it's a very easy transition to go, on the weekends to go out and play records because you understand how these records are made. You understand the musicality and key matching or key changes or why certain songs work together and others don't. And so that, I guess that would be the third prong of my career that is on the healthier side. You know, it's just a lot of fun. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So you have a couple different profiles actually, and one of yours is all about do what?
Too many Instagrams.
That's okay. Jen has a couple too, don't you?
I do. Yep.
Yeah.
Totally okay. Nobody's counting.
At some point it's like, at first I didn't understand it, but then from a what are people looking at perspective, it started making sense,
right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So on one of your other accounts, like you have a whole lot of pictures that are a lot of videos of you working out. Can you tell us a little bit about your fitness journey and how that ties in?
Yeah, we're gonna have to go way back. So
okay, let's go.
That platform is called Rebuilding Ability. And so we'll kind of start at the end and then go back to the beginning. So Rebuilding Ability is my way of chronicling my journey with cerebral palsy. I was born 3 months premature, and what this disorder is a brain disorder similar to that. It behaves like a stroke. Mm-hmm. So basically, I was had a lack of oxygen during the birth process, and it resulted in a severe stroke. And they usually diagnose it between ages like 2 and 5. So around age 3, they were seeing some developmental delays and some things that were not on par with what how the normal kids were behaving physically. So they diagnosed me with cerebral palsy spastic diplegia, which means it's both sides of the lower body are affected in a spastic manner versus a static manner.
Okay.
That's a whole lot of jargon that nobody cares about, so we can break that down.
It's okay, we get it.
We have a doctor with us, yes? What is your doctorate in?
Not that kind of doctor.
I was just making sure before I dove.
Not that good. Clarinet doctor. That's my jam.
All right, we can get it. We can talk deep theory, 17th century, whatever you want to say.
Let's do all of that.
Yeah. So and it's such a thing. It's like CP is still like rare enough where people are like, what is that? What happens with that? Why are you not in a wheelchair? Is like all the questions that one gets or one has, like, I guess when they're a kid, is like, what do you do with this? You know, it's So I mean, they were seeing, they basically told my mom, like, he's not going to walk, he's not going to ride a bike, he's not going to essentially have that normal embodiment experience that a child his age would have. Teen years are going to be hard, no sports, no nothing. So I had this surgery at age 5 that did its best to. I don't know how familiar you are with cerebral palsy in your strength trainings. I don't want to assume that that's something you're super familiar with if you're not.
Not as much, and I'm going to guess that our listeners are also not as much. So base it down as much as you need to.
Yeah, so like a lot of time, and the reason I like to go into the description and be more explicit with that is because CP's representation in media is completely wrong. Like, for the most part. It's now RJ Mitty from Breaking Bad did a great job. There's also a show that my friend Ryan O'Connor wrote and starred in called Special on Netflix that is about having cerebral palsy. And obviously, like, they casted somebody with, wrote, starred, and directed the show who has it. So 2 great examples there, but by and large, media representation is not great. So like I said earlier, it's a neonatal stroke that behaves as such. So cases can vary from moderate, mild side of moderate case like mine to extremely severe and wheelchair bound to almost, there's even cases of mental retardation, problems with speech, problems with cognition, all the way up to vegetable state. So
that's the gamut.
Yeah, it's literally like this wide. Like, you can have someone who maybe has one crooked finger all the way to will never be ambulatory, will never be able to bathe or feed themselves. Completely runs the gamut. I am somewhere on the lower end of the percentile of, and we can get into that as my story unfolds, but I'm on the lower end of the percentile. Like, the doctors knew, okay, his legs are affected, his balance is affected, his proprioception in terms of, how does he handle himself in space and I guess kinesthetically, there were developmental delays. So this surgery sought to mitigate some of these factors that included the muscles that were atrophying themselves because they were so spastic. The analogy I like to make is if you spend 24 hours all the way to 6 months making a fist, eventually the muscles around that are going to completely atrophy because all of these muscles that are in a spastic state, making an effort to make that fist, those are the only ones working, right? Everything else around it is a supporting or ancillary muscle that is not being paid attention to. So essentially, that's what happened to me. This surgery was to lengthen my hamstrings, turn my femurs out, broke my feet, reset those, turned everything away. What do they call it in training? Distal? Is that the word?
Was everything pointed more towards the midline?
Yeah. So it was like internal midline rotation, a negative rotation in my hips. So when you see like a pigeon-toed, it was like pigeon-legged, like all the way.
Got it.
Is that, I guess the non-PC term is bow-legged.
You were going. They tried to make you do external rotation.
Yeah, I guess it would be like ballet first position. Like they were trying to, I date a lot of dancers. This is where it's just rattling around. Trying to rotate the hips and bones to basically first position to say, can we mitigate these muscles that are pulling them inward? So that wheelchair bound me for 18 months.
Oh.
Yeah, half body cast, whole thing. And they said, you're going to have to learn how to walk again. You're going to have to do all this stuff. You're going to basically start over, regress to, age 10 months in terms of your
At 5 years old?
mhm. So it was kindergarten. I was just like, well, crap.
Right?
Yeah.
That's when you're supposed to be running on the playground and stuff.
Right. Right. And there was some of that, and again, like pre-operation, there was a lot of that, but it was not graceful. So a lot of that is a blur at this point, but I think at some point I came out of the cast and started very mild physical therapy at Vanderbilt. And obviously children don't have the agency, the mental and emotional agency to say, I hate this, or I like this, or can we try something different? It's a lot different than a 27-year-old choosing to go do what they want to do. So as a kid, I obviously hated PT because it was just like, this hurts and I can't see a return on investment. So kind of stuck with that, made my way through school, didn't play any sports. Grew up pretty much a normal kid. My parents socialized me as one of the normal kids. They said, there's kids riding bikes. Well, you're going to get on a bike and go ride it. There's kids playing football. You're going to go be on the defensive line because you need to. Like it was just very, and it's like how I would want to parent my future children is like, hey, you need to be socialized as such as the other kids are so that you don't view yourself as handicapped, right?
Yeah.
So gloss over most of early life and you just, again, socialize a normal kid. But college rolls around and I had never, I associated anything with fitness as this is just for jocks, or like this is for people that are like obsessed with their body. And I like didn't understand it. It just seemed like a meathead thing. And like, and this is long before the days of Instagram, so this is long before the days of like thirst traps. Like, you know what I mean? That ass picture in the gym, like, there's later in the story, there's a beautiful moment where I realized I was hot. So like, I get to college and I'm like getting ready to graduate from MTSU and I needed a physical education credit to graduate. And I'm talking to my friend who's a dance teacher, and I'm like, Meg, what can I do? I got to do something, but I don't want to like run track. Like, I don't want to do something stupid that just not gonna work. He's like, you should try Pilates. I'm like, you mean that girls workout? You mean that I just immediately, every image of like, no, came in my mind. And she's like, no, really, you should try it because there's going to be things that it's going to help you mitigate, and help you learn full body connectivity. You're going to learn what your transverse abdominal is and what your glute medius is and all the problems that you have. You're going to learn how to foam roll. I know. I love it. Believe me, I studied for NASM. I know the terminology. So I go into Pilates kicking and screaming, basically like, I really don't want to do this, but I need to get it to graduate. And because you have to understand, the mental headspace was, one, I can't do anything physical. Anything having to do with exercise is either meatheads or thirst traps. And 3, what's the point? There's no point. These are the cards God dealt to me. It's just going to be that way. So like 21-year-old me that's where I was living. So I get into Pilates and I kind of sheepishly tell this teacher, this professor, I'm like, hey, this is what I'm dealing with. And don't tell the other kids, but like, I'm really freaked out. She's like, it's fine. You're going to love it. We're going to do great. I am not kidding you. By the end of that semester, my entire skeletal system, I was standing up straight. One of my legs had lengthened. Awesome. I was doing planks like you wouldn't believe. Before I started that class, I couldn't do an air squat without falling over. So obviously the testosterone in me got hungry, you know, towards the end of that Pilates class. And I was like, I want to lift weights.
There we are.
So that's where I'm at, right? So
yep.
you know, testosterone goes, this isn't enough. I want to go lift weights. So I'm doing all the V-ups and I'm doing all this Pilates stuff that's got me super lean and balanced, and I'm getting stronger and still, you know, still limping a little bit. I've got a bit of a natural limp that just is due to the rotation in my hips, but seeing results all over the place. And the professor, Angela Ramos, she couldn't believe it. She was like, this is nuts. I've never seen this before. This is such like a fun experiment to work with. Mm-hmm. And I started lifting weights, and I hit MTSU's gym every hour and try bench press, try pull-ups,
You've tried all the things.
Yeah, try all the things. And then suddenly it was like, there was like 90 days into that, I just kind of looked in the mirror and I was like, huh, it worked. I'm like able to lift my amp head without like, oh God, this is hard. I'm like able to carry the groceries up the stairs and like all this stuff. Mm-hmm. So speeding up. So I've graduated college. I'm starting to lift weights. I just like drop in to this CrossFit studio in Williamson County. And I was like, I just want to try this. Like at this point, I'm starving for anything having to do with fitness. I'm just starving for it.
Side note, Chase is here in Nashville with me, and Jen is in Tallahassee, Florida, for anybody who's listening.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Coast to coast.
Yeah.
So I drop in to this CrossFit Williamson County. Mm-hmm. And this whole time, the even funnier thing is I'm dating a Pilates teacher at the time. So like the most irony you could ever possibly think of mm-hmm. is I've got this Pilates teacher. I'm going to her studio at Well Body in East Nashville, and I'm like still doing Pilates, still getting strong. And then mm-hmm. these CrossFit guys are like, yeah, we'll take you in. Like, here, just try like a month of classes. It'll be fun and blah, 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 and start doing CrossFit. And then the first day I'm there, this woman comes up to me and she's like in tears. And I'm like, hi, are you okay? And she was like, no, hi, my name's so-and-so. I'd like you to meet my son. My son playing over there in the children's area has cerebral palsy. And I heard that you have CP.
Oh, wow.
So I start talking to her mm-hmm. and we end up talking for like an hour and a half. And mm-hmm. she's like, what can I give to my son? How do I get, how do I mentally get here? How does he get here? Like when he's older, blah, blah, blah. So I'm starting to think, because I'd been talking with my girlfriend at the time on what kind of story to tell. She was encouraging me to document this story, and I'm going, man, I don't want this. I don't want to talk about myself. It's stupid. Like, and she's like, no, you can help people. You can mm-hmm. start giving people an inside look as to what this narrative is. And so I'm doing the CrossFit thing, and I'm thinking, okay, like maybe I'll just start writing a blog. I'll start mm-hmm. Instagramming me working out in an effort to help people. Mm-hmm. I don't, and at the time that was, I guess 3 or 4 years ago, I didn't really know what to make of it, but kept lifting weights, blah, blah, blah. This whole time I'm doing some contract work for Lululemon for the brand and doing some music stuff for them. And so the Lulu Hill Center guys, their management was like, hey, we heard that you were at CrossFit Wilco and at all these other places, and like you've been contracting for us. Would you want to basically be like a de facto ambassador? Like, not necessarily on the ambassador program, but function as such to go into these spaces, wearing the gear and repping the brand. And so I was like, yeah, well, let's up the ante and do something a little more serious. Like, let's put on an event, let's put on these community events. So we ended up putting on, and this is probably a year after the CrossFit thing, we ended up putting on this event called Sweat in the Gulch. And we had all these vendors come in and host their workouts to kind of promote their studio, promote their fitness studio, and connection after connection. And then it really blew up a couple years ago when a connection from Lululemon brought me to Nashville Fit magazine. And they did an article called Recovering from Disability. And it was just doing the same thing here. Like, just tell your story. How'd you get here? Why did you decide to fight CP? Again, you answer the question, what's the point? What's your why? So out of all of that, Rebuilding Ability was birthed as an effort to basically say the world is never going to be safe for cerebral palsy. It's a terrible place to be if you have a disability, but there are ways you can fight it. And what I'm trying to do now is partner with the right trainers, partner with the right educators to get people with CP or any other, kinesthetic disability to get inside their head and give them the empowerment they need to go and lift that weight. So that's Rebuilding Ability, because, if you're working with the ability you got, you might have to rebuild it. That's the idea. So that's where all that came from.
Yeah. Where do we go from there? Wow.
That's that's the life story. So
that's quite the story. I love that you talk about, like, you started with Pilates, and how many of us, Pilates, CrossFit, whatever, they all have you always have a stereotype that goes with these. 100%. So, you've got some guts to go in this class. Like, I don't know, I want to do this. This is like for girls, that's like, guys in ballet or girls in strongman, for crying out loud.
Narrow-minded. It's so narrow-minded of me.
It is.
After you think about it, after being in Pilates for 2 years, going to CrossFit, then going to like a private trainer and do what I'm doing now, you don't even realize that all of those things have their place in. It's like a production. Like when you're making a track, you can't just say like, well, that guitar part is what it is. Well, no, it's part of a bigger piece. It's part of a, that doesn't work, or that hi-hat doesn't work. You don't know until you listen to the bigger piece. And that's the same thing here, is like every person in my life that was into fitness at all was like, no, Pilates is like the only thing you should be doing. Like, you shouldn't even touch weights. And so that headspace changed, because I was like, oh, I kind of see why. Okay. It's more about the interbody connectivity and not so much how much iron can I pump. So you learn, it's like, I think when you go into spaces like that, you think you understand the stereotype or this idea you have in your head, and it turns out to be wrong. And the most helpful thing that you could do, it's kind of cool.
Very true. Yeah. Very true. Jen, I don't want to talk this whole time. Feel free to chime in.
I feel like I'm the whole time. Shoot.
Well, you have, but that's the point of you being here. So it's totally fine.
Right. And it sounds like Pilates gave you a good base for your weightlifting and your weight training, that kind of stuff too. So it's like, a lot of what we talk about on this podcast, right, is how things tie in together and how they support each other, and how much it's totally ignored for one reason or another. Sometimes by potentially, we'll give them the benefit of the doubt, well-intentioned medical professionals who just think that they need to protect you. And so,
or who aren't well-intentioned, or just ignorant and lazy. There's that too.
Either,
I mean, there's a lot of school of thought around like physical therapy of like certain firms, they don't really want you to get well. They just want to keep making the coin, off. They're like, I was really bored with it because it wasn't challenging enough. And I'm like, I want to deadlift. I want to like, push a tire or something. Like, I want to actually do something that's going to make sense. So I don't know if that's relevant to your point. That's just where my head went.
No, I think so. I mean, it's that kind of just bouncing off what you were saying, where these things have their place, and we just often kind of miss that. Or people, the average person working like a 9 to 5, right, is like, oh, well, I twisted my ankle, so I'm going to go to physical therapy for 6 weeks and then I'm done. Like,
no.
Well, maybe you twisted your ankle because there was a problem, and maybe physical therapy gets you to a point where you can address the problem.
I mean, it's the same thing. It's like, I'm having a pain in my neck, I'm going to get a steroid shot. It's the same thing. It's like, back up. Let's focus on, and that's what's great about cerebral palsy is we know what the problem is. And now it's the terrible thing about the Western medicine here is that it's like, well, we could put, and thank God I was never put on like barbiturates or benzodiazepines or anything as like pain, because, you know, chronic pain is name of the game with CP. So it's like, we'll just put you on a pill, you know, you'll be out of pain, but you'll be, you know, lazy, overweight, not strong, blah, blah, blah. And I just kind of, you know, because I never went down that route, I just kind of had to find a route that made sense. And it's a route that a lot of doctors would be like, you shouldn't do that. You're going to hurt your spine. I'm like, I'll find out if I'll hurt, like, let me. You know what I mean? I'm not going to go.
I'm tired of hearing that. You'll hurt your spine. Okay. You can hurt yourself doing anything. I think driving a car is more dangerous than being in the gym. It all comes down to ignorance.
Yeah. I mean, it's like how I used to make fun of people that were in the gym all the time, or like kind of just have a general disdain for people that were in the gym all the time because I didn't understand it until I got there. And like, you know, pre-COVID, like I'd sit in the sauna for 30 minutes afterwards and have that awesome experience of like feeling cleansed and feeling strong. And like, then they talk about like gym addiction. Well, like you get there and you're like, oh, I get it. I see what the move is, you know, and I'm now kind of a converted believer in that you can fix a lot of problems with a little bit of cardio and a whole lot of weights.
Bingo. So can I tell a quick story?
Yeah.
All right. So funny story. I'm going through my 4th injury right now. I've not been able to feel these fingers completely in a year and a half.
Wow.
And it stemmed from a lot of things, too many car accidents, and then hypermobility. And then I was cramming for a recital on an alto flute, which is real stupid. Don't do that. I know better, but I did it anyway. So, you know, alto flute's way out here, and then your neck does this, and I had problems. And then suddenly I am ending up with can't turn my head certain directions, get shooting electrical pains down my arm. My entire right quadrant just seized up. I started to get muscle atrophy at the same time. I go see a chiropractor who tells me you need to rest. Like, I'm gonna punch you in your face as much as I like you. This is not the answer I need right now. Okay. Yeah. So resting helped. I mean, his work did help me, but I'm like, look, dude, I need to get back into shape for the army, for all this other stuff, right? Fast forward, I'm still seeing this chiropractor.
Pause. So, I totally knew that you served, but how long ago was that?
How long ago was what?
Are you still enlisted?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you.
Yeah, I've been in for 18 years as of last month.
18 years? Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt your story. Not at
all.
I love the armed forces. So that's like one thing I'm really passionate about. So
we love America.
Trust me.
Well, thank you. But so like the thing is, you know, I need to be able to play and be strong for all 3 of my jobs, for my job as a personal trainer, for my job as a musician, and my job as a soldier. I need to be able to do things, and I'm not able to do anything because if I do something wrong, the symptoms get worse and then I can't do anything. Right. So I've just, the last year and a half, I really haven't done much working out at all because I wasn't sure what I could do. And it didn't seem like there was a rhyme or a reason to what would set my symptoms off. And I didn't want to go backwards. And goodness knows I didn't want it to become permanent. Because anytime you get numbness and tingling, that's indicative of a nerve issue, right? So I go see a sports medicine doctor after we had a Mardi Gras. We played at Mardi Gras last year. We marched the Rex parade, which is a 5-mile parade. Wow. And the next day I felt like someone had taken a baseball bat to both of my hips. And I thought, this is not normal. It's a freaking parade. I understand I'm standing around in terrible shoes, but really?
Yeah.
I'm not that old. Okay, let me go see what's going on, right? So I go see a sports med doc, and then we're working through this, that, and the other. And we finally get to this, and he says, look, he's one of the best I've seen. If you're in Nashville and you need a sports medicine doctor, go see Dr. Clark Holmes at Impact Sports, right by, it was right across the street from my gym, actually. He will listen to you.
Where do you train? Your gym?
I'm at Next Level Fitness on Church Street.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But this doctor actually listens, which he's like, do you want me to just write you a letter and do this? I'm like, yes, but I also would like to feel my fingers. I kind of need that. Right. And so he's like, well, would you like an MRI? I was like, yes, I would absolutely like an MRI. Please find out what's wrong with my neck. We found all kinds of junk in here that's wrong. So I'm getting that seen, but basically I did chiropractic care. I tried some physical therapy that didn't work. Chiropractic helped. Basically, the only thing that helps really is traction, right? Getting getting some space and some pressure off those nerves. But I'm like, look, doc, I can't be told I need to rest anymore. I'm a hypermobile person. It's 3 years and a half.
Yeah, it's not happening. Yeah.
No, it's not rehab. And my body is desperate for strength. And it's impacting all three of my careers, all three of my jobs. And this is not the answer anymore. And I'm like, look, I might be a personal trainer, but I can't train myself. I can't look at myself. I can't be objective. And I don't know what I need.
Right.
Do you know a personal trainer you could refer me to? And he went, I appreciate that. I'm like, I need strength. I don't need a steroid shot and I don't need surgery. And he goes, well, I respect that. So there you go. So he sent me to somebody who's a PT and strength coach. So hopefully I'm like, look, I need strength, especially here, so it's good when you get to see one of those people, but you really do have to advocate for yourself. And strength is so underrated. Like you can mobilize all you want, but if you're just a loosey-goosey mess, you're going to stay there.
Well, that is the balance I've always had to strike, because part of my issue is, I don't want to interrupt you. Is that where you're going?
That's the story. If I had a point other than that, I forgot it.
Oh, it was a good point. I like because it segues nicely. That's always the tough balance to make, right? Is the CP and the way it behaves is you're not flexible at all. You're like born muscle bound. So it's even if you don't have muscle. So it's like, okay, well, how much of this is, if you're building this house, how much of it foundationally do we need to get strong before we move into flexible stairs or flexible wall, whatever it is? Do the walls need to be solid, or do the beams need to be flexible? Who knows? Bad analogy. Point being, the striking the balance between serious strength and serious flexibility is always tough to find, which I think that's the importance of having a coach who can say, okay, we've made progress here. We haven't made progress over here. Maybe we tip your programming a little more in the flexibility world, or maybe we tip it more to the strength world. Who knows? Now, you as a soldier, if you're doing ruck runs, you don't need to be doing yoga. It's like, you need to.
Not going to help me much, honestly, right now.
Yeah, you need to condition for carrying an M4 and mags and radio and all that stuff. It's like,
I'm in the band. I don't have to do any of that. Sorry. Just ruined your idea. I haven't done that since basic training.
Oh, there you go. Oh, you mean that's not part of your weekly programming? Is an 80-pound plate vest? Wow.
I mean, I don't want my personal program to get out to the world. But
one thing I'll do is I'll take my plate kit and do pull-ups with it, because I'm like, okay, body weight's not enough. Let's throw the plates on. It's like,
there you go,
30 pounds of armor, and I'm just like, trying to. But I think it's an interesting. Here's the original point I was trying to make, is the problem with how we approach cerebral palsy is, well, they'll never be strong. And that's like a terrible thing when you think about it. And again, it depends on the case. If someone is wheelchair bound and non-ambulatory, then I would say, okay, we let's go more maybe the flexibility route, or the fine motor skill route, or maybe mental health route, maybe some different things. But if there's a person with CP who's ambulatory and they have a case of couch potato-itis, then I think the answer is get in the squat rack, get on that flat bench and see what you can do, work on the flexibility. Flexibility is like a mix engineering. It's going to be like a lifetime thing. You're never gonna have that perfect like, oh, okay, I'm flexible now. I woke up and I was flexible. That's pain. You get into pain management, stuff like that. Jen, weigh in. I'm
Yeah, no, I mean, and there's a lot of people who don't have CP who still have problems like that, where it's they're told by somebody that they're not going to be strong, where they're told, oh, you're not flexible, or
you're not flexible, therefore that's the end of the story.
Or they're going to a coach, and this one always bugs me.
Yeah.
Who doesn't know the difference between flexibility and mobility, or how to address that. Who doesn't understand what hypermobility is and how to address that. And who doesn't understand like what you're talking about, where it's like, okay, well, you're muscle bound in this direction, but strength has helped you with that.
Yeah. And
it's because you're counterbalancing the muscles that are atrophied or weak. You're bringing those up in order to assist with that. You can, it's, if you're trying to keep the scales balanced, right?
Yeah.
You can only tip so far in one direction before you start getting into problems. So, okay, well, we'll get a little bit more flexibility. Okay, well, now we're starting to teeter. We'll get a little more strength, a little more, and they feed into each other, So like,
and that's even something there's a point you made in there about like the overactive v underactive. It's for me, I've got an overactive psoas and an underactive glute.
Yeah.
So I have a pretty serious lumbar lordosis, basically, booty popping as we.
And it's a nice
what'd you say?
Anterior pelvic tilt going on, eh?
That word, I don't use this word lightly. That word is triggering because it's like every trainer's like, your anterior pelvic tilt. You need to work on it. I know.
Just call it booty pop. It'll make you happier.
I like it.
Not on the male frame. Trust me. That's the type of thing where like that is such a serious thing. It seems like that's the one mountain in my fitness life is okay. I'm still looking at this thing as unmovable. Is how do we deal with something like that is so. It's been that way for 25 years. So it's like, what do you do? But again, I think it comes down to finding, it's not just the one person, the one right person, because there is no one right person to train you. There's
100%
multiple people in your community and multiple versions of your programming. And we even talked about music and how that ties in, but like, there's multiple people in your community that you have to have in order to conquer mountains like that. So an anterior pelvic tilt is a pretty serious thing because it sucks and it causes chronic pain. So it's like, okay, you can't just stretch. You got to stretch and lift weights. You can't do that. You got to do yoga as well. You've got to better sleeping habits. And there's all these kind of things that can tie into that,
Yeah. Yeah, and it's, I mean, the same reason in the classical and jazz music worlds where it's like, and I'm speaking to that because that's my background, so you can feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on your end or if it's included. But, we don't stay with one private teacher our whole career. Now, we'll spend years with one before we move on to another. And sometimes less if they're kind of like, oh, this is not a right fit, that's fine. But it's, you have a series of things to learn from the person that you're currently with. So my first instructor, I had a lot of learning how to just practice in the most basic of senses, right? Like, okay, you cannot just sit down and play the etude from top to bottom over and over and expect let's work on how to isolate stuff and how to know how to do that.
Where's your phrasing at? Where's your breath control at?
Well, that was teacher number 2.
Oh.
Teacher number 3 was then technique and like time management a little bit and like a little bit of just dig in and be insane. Teacher number 4 was a lot more time management and mental health and phrasing articulation, or not phrasing, air, voicing, that kind of stuff. Anyway.
Sure.
But I spent years with each of those because there was like, okay, well, it's going to take me, I see where you are, and you can only take so many steps at a time. And like, as an instructor or a coach, you have to triage, right?
Yeah.
But it's okay, well, we're going to work this direction first because I think this is the biggest problem. But you go to somebody else and they're like, well, I think this is your biggest problem. We could be working toward the same goal very different ways. That's a lot of things I threw out there all at once.
No,
but
I have a general handle on what you're saying British have a saying, horses for courses. It's you've got to put the right teacher in the right place at the right time in your career. Otherwise, if Angela, when she first had her injuries and they said, just keep going, maybe she did need to rest, or maybe they were wrong. It's kind of, it just depends on where you are in that journey. And that is team combined with effort, combined with conviction about why you're there, that's how you get to success. Yeah. It's like those three things.
Yep.
So of course you need a different teacher for each sector and some teachers you do stay with for life, but I would say that's the exception, not the rule.
And you also do Krav Maga, don't you?
Oh,
sorry to interrupt you there.
My favorite thing.
You transition from Pilates to brutal Israeli fighting. That's talk about the gamut here.
How familiar are you with Krav Maga, being enlisted?
I love that everybody thinks that.
Well, because they're not. Like, we have armed service people who train with us up in Nashville, and they're like, we did not get it this intensely.
Let me tell you, at basic training, I had 1 day of hand-to-hand combat, and they took away my glasses, so I couldn't see jack. Because I had to get a waiver to join the Army because I'm friggin' blind. So I was like, really, it's cool. Cool, guys. Appreciate that flight.
Having bad eyesight.
It's really bad eyesight.
Now, how did you? Isn't that usually like a non-qualifier now? Like, you can't get in? No?
Maybe for the Air Force, but I'm not flying.
Oh, Air Force, that's right.
So, I just play the flute for my country, so I mean, if I can memorize stuff too, I'm good. I mean, I've got contacts, but I mean, I just had to get a waiver. I'm like, look, can she wear glasses? Okay, she's fine. So they teach you all these things, and it was 1 day. Other people had several days. We had 1 day, and they're like, okay, take your glasses off. Angela, you go over here. And then pair up this other girl, and I'm like, with who? Boom! And I was on the ground. I never had a chance to they're like, do this. I'm like, I can't see. It's like I had no. Same with like the giant, the toothpicks, the pupil sticks, the giant Q-tips that they make you. I was like, I'm gonna beat somebody down. Great. Took away my glasses, and next thing I know, boom! I didn't even get to hit anybody. I was so mad.
Off your rocker, just done.
Yeah, I was not. So what's my experience? Double zeros.
That's the thing. It's like we have what was he? I think he was Army, and he'd done 5 years in the sandbox, and he was like this guy that trains up at Nashville Krav Maga, and he'd done 5 or 6 years in the sandbox. He's like I guess as a concept we know this stuff, but general enlisted wouldn't even get, officers wouldn't even get this this kind of. So my friend Austin, this girl I know, brought me to Krav Maga because it was based on pure curiosity. I'd been lifting and still doing my thing, doing some hot yoga over at Fahrenheit, which I love. This is all pre-COVID, and doing my thing and staying on my programming, trying to. And I keep seeing these posts from Austin and her friends doing this thing. I'm like, that looks kind of fun. I just want to go try that. And so same story showed up and said, here's what I'm working with. And it didn't take one class. And I was like, I'm in. This is what it is it's an Israeli form of hand-to-hand combat that's extremely brutal. It was made in the 30s, I believe, by Emil Lichtenfeld to fight Nazis, when that was actually a problem, and not like we say today, everything's a Nazi. This was when there were actual Nazis.
There were actual Nazis, right?
And it's a form of street combat that the idea is you run up on me, I'm gonna end it and end it now. And you're not. It's so brutal that the tenet is overwhelm that attacker with violence. And so I came in there going, man, I'm just going to give it a shot. Like, there's no way this is actually going to work. And the two instructors, they're like guys in their early 30s, they're like, what do you have? Palsy? Oh, hell yeah, let's go. Like, so they immediately just like threw me in, and they're like, started teaching me these techniques and all this, defense from getting choked, from getting pulled, all the real things. So my mindset started changing about it. I'm going, the world doesn't give a crap if I have CP. See that same tenet coming back again. It's like, if I'm walking downtown after a gig at 2 a.m. and I look like I have money on me, and I'm maybe not strapped because I was working in a bar, someone doesn't care. Excuse me, sir, do you have a function?
Right.
Hug you, but do you have a functional? It's like, now, after almost a year in Krav Maga, the mental capacity and the physical capacity to defend myself is something that 5-year-old Chase could have never understood, ever.
Yeah.
And it's like, you get in that room and those people become, one, their family, but two, there is no soft, lovey feelings in that room. They're like, all right, so I use this version of the C word quite often with my friends. Cripple, not the other one.
Okay, I was like, what are we about to do here, Chase? What are we about to do? Like, am I gonna have to go in and bleep our stuff so we don't get banned? Like,
funny because you went there. So I make a lot of cripple jokes. I make jokes about being crippled and sexy. Was a me and joking about. I have a few friends with CP and being in Krav Maga for almost a year. By the way, Nashville Krav Maga on Fesslers Parkway. Instructors Miles Gomez, Lauren Pachaco, I mispronounced her name, and Sam Collins. Fantastic people. Best place to be. You want to learn to defend yourself, go to Nashville Krav Maga. But something they started doing is, like, most of that room before they got to know me was pretty uncomfortable with, like, okay, there's like clearly a guy with a problem here, but once he starts getting on the upper body combatives, where it's over, it's just straight diesel. Like, so they're going, Miles and Sam and all them just can't believe it. They're like, you're hitting so hard, and like the aggression is there and all that stuff. And Miles is like, yeah, it's because his legs don't work. So it's like all that power just goes up. But the funny thing is why I said the word cripple is because it's become kind of this endearing joke as part of like an initiation for new members. Is what they have to do is a new member comes in, and if I'm in there, they have to push me over or try.
Oh.
And so stop and be like, somebody push the cripple. Isn't that great, man?
That's so funny.
My life goal is to get canceled, so I hope I get canceled over this. It's so bad. Me and Gina Carano can kick it. This one girl, she was probably like 5'9", 150. Like, she's a pretty strong girl. Like, she definitely like lifted, and she was pretty strong, and she's a great beginner. She great fight in her. She kind of like bumped me in the line, and I just looked at her and I was like, come on, do it.
At me, bro.
Me. She like, whoa, just throws me to the ground. And Miles, the instructor, goes, that's what I want. Everyone look. When I say Chase over, you push Chase over. And so these guys have become family. And I talked to him after we started doing that. I talked to him and I said, man, I appreciate that. And I said, because every other life experience, like 80% of other life experiences, are going to baby the crap out of you. And they're just going to treat you like glass. And he said, look, I talked to the owners, and I said, we got to start treating this guy like the real world. So I'll be training, and somebody will come up and just just put their body weight on me and throw me offline, throw me off the pad or whatever I'm trying to do. and I think that's so important, that that's a metaphor for life with a disability, is you need that Are y'all familiar with Jocko Willink? I'm sure
Oh yeah.
Angela, yeah, you know he is. So Jocko's a retired SEAL, head of Bruiser.
Bruiser Task Force. So he wrote Extreme Ownership, which we referenced in a previous episode. One of the Healthy Habits one.
Yeah,
I don't remember which one.
Yeah.
He has a video.
This is the first one.
Like, good. He's like, are you tired? Good. Does it hurt? Good. Are you out of time? Good. You know, basically, and that's what Miles and I talked about, was this kind of Jocko approach to so what if you're handicapped? So what if you're crippled? You need to be uncomfortable. You need to be afraid. And that's why I do Krav Maga, is like, okay, one, yeah, great, testosterone. I can beat up on leather pads and beat up on grown men. And I'm just gonna be real. The women in this studio are far more ferocious than the men. That's a hill I will die on. These women are absolute monsters. Aggression is there. You know what I mean? They run those real life simulations, and they will absolutely murder you. But he was, I think you need to be in this studio. You need to be in this gym to understand real life. Because he said, because you're hungry for it, to have that experience and to not be treated like glass. You know, so I'm in, get in there, take hits, get in there. And I just graduated my first belt. So that moved up from beginner to intermediate. So I'm like,
nice.
Congrats.
Couldn't have even thought of that 20 years ago. I'd have been like, no way.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
You know what he's saying though? You've got to be uncomfortable. You got to live outside your comfort zone. This is exactly what our last guest, Rusty Holmes, Dr. Rusty Holmes, said. Who's not that type of doctor. He has his doctorate in horn. But he said the same thing. You need to do hard stuff. What's your morning routine? His morning routine is that he gets up and immediately takes a cold shower. And it's like, no, I'm not going there. That's too different. No. He's like, I can do difficult things. Like, that's what you pick. It's a fun conversation. That's our last episode.
Yeah, I choose to get tripped by men who are 100 pounds heavier than me, but cold showers, I don't know if I can do that.
No, it's
we've all got our things too, right? Like I can't do the cold showers, but fun fact, Angela, you and I'm sure we'll get into this at some point. Ryan and I were talking, that's my fiance, about nervous system states and why the cold shower is a problem for me. Whoa. So we'll leave that alone, but unpack that later. But we've all got our hard things that we're like, you know what, this is hard for me, but I'm going to dig in. And for me, a lot of it's, the strongman type stuff. For you, it's the Krav. For Angela, I'm sure right now it's the stuff that you're digging into medically, right?
I'm sure you're dealing with something, aren't you?
Well, but I mean, you just referenced the hand thing you got. So like
the
not training.
That I don't feel. Yeah.
Not training like normal and having to do something different. I mean, for me, that would be it for me if I were you.
It drives me crazy. Like I can just now get back to deadlifting, and sometimes rows feel great and other times rows make me go numb. I'm not okay with it, but I also don't want it to be permanent. So I'll be patient as we figure it out. But you just, sometimes doing the hard thing is just being patient.
Yeah.
And I'm not good at it.
Fine. Go ahead.
No, we live in a world that's just like, the Instagram thing is great, to market yourself and to be. I love what you said about patience, because it's like I think we just live, like you see results immediate, like great photo, like chiseled dude, or or this, the girl with the abs and the butt, that's a product. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Versus just like, well, how many of us are digging into programs? You know what I mean? Digging programming, finding, nutrition information, finding mental health information. So
absolutely. Yeah, I think we referenced some of that in a previous article.
I'm pretty sure.
Episode, whatever.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we did too, where it's like people just, all you see are the afters. And if you see the befores, they're attached to the afters. And like, you don't see, me at 230 or whatever I was at my top weight, just like you know, going, hey, look at me, I'm just starting out, I'm a lard and I've never touched a bar before. You know?
The process isn't always sexy. We want sexy. That's what we want to see. We don't see the process. It's boring, right?
No, you know what the sexiest thing though is that dedication. Is if I meet someone who's like, nope, I mean, I don't compromise. I'm in my 4 days a week, my 5 days a week, whatever program it is, and I don't care who you are, you can't come between that.
Yeah,
that's awesome. And it's like weight goes up and down, body fat percentage goes up and down, skeletal muscle mass up and down. But if you have that, dedication, you're good. You can do, if you can do a hard thing, you can do many hard things.
Exactly.
Yep. Which translates to music, because being a musician is not easy.
Oh.
Yeah. And that is a hard thing to be a musician.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like a floofy thing on the front side of it, but it's on the front side, whatever. But it's not. It's difficult. It's difficult to make a living. It's difficult to stick with it. It's difficult to chase your dream and like get, shove aside the whole musicians are broke. You'll always be broke. You're a starving artist. There's no money in it. Blah, blah. Get a real job. It's hard.
A lot of that has to do with, by and large, musicians don't know how to diversify their assets or their skill sets to make more money. Like that's a pretty simple thing. One, we don't teach personal finance in school. Like we don't teach how to invest in real estate. We don't teach vertical integration. Like, own the venue that you're playing at. You know what I mean? Like, things like
the things we don't teach in music school should be a whole episode.
The fact that we don't have a basic business course for musicians. I'm like, every single one of us teaches privately. I don't know anybody who doesn't teach privately. Right. And we all have to, like, come on.
These books, you know how many of these books are business?
A
lot of them. When did I buy them? After college. Why? Because they didn't teach me any of it.
Yeah, you didn't know what to do. Like, I didn't know, okay, how do I actually make connections to recruit? How do I actually figure out what I should charge? How do I ask for money? How do I create a student contract and feel like, no, you actually have to follow this. Like, I'm not your problem, not mine. Come on. Business, important.
Why, and especially with the fitness thing, like, why is it that so many musicians don't care? Because I feel like, again, back to the Instagram thing, like we're in this age, like freedom and like, oh my gosh, like take care of your mental health and your body. It's all good things. I mean, it's a little overtly sexy. You know what I mean? The mental health, like swiping like RM Drake quotes or whatever that are like, oh, that's a happy little thing. But I'll just say I feel like that's changing, but it's great to meet other musicians that are dedicated to health on a systematic level and not just my label hired me a trainer, so I've got to get thin. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
How do y'all feel about that? You know what I'm saying? Like, how do you think that culture is changing where more musicians are becoming systematically healthier?
I think just based on the number of people that we're seeing online who do cross the line there, I would say yes. My treatise, when I was getting my doctorate, was on, so it was on the cross application, right, of movement therapies and strength training, that kind of stuff, to daily clarinet practice. That was the premise. But in the process, it's like, okay, well, I need to know what's already been done. I need to know what the studies currently say, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, so the first injury related study I found, just asking private, anonymous questions. Do you suffer from some sort of pain related to your playing? Or, which I would actually currently describe as, there's an imbalance problem. There's a weakness problem because you're inactive, because we think that we just have to spend our day in a practice room. But the first study I found was early 70s. Okay.
Wow.
But it was that's late. As far as I'm concerned, that's late. It should have been early.
It is.
And the numbers are stupid high. I mean, there's not a study that's under 70 or 80%. Yes. And some of them are upwards of 90, saying, yes, there's a problem. But we're still through the early 2000s and early 2010s. Most of the research, most of the articles and et cetera produced on this topic are basically just trying to confirm that there's a problem. We just need to admit that there is a problem, end of story. And that's where it stops. So here we are in 2021, because I have no idea how long this will be in the ether, like here we are in 2021, and we're just now, like, and there have been people who've been practicing for, at least a decade, sometimes more, on like, there's people who are yoga for musicians. There's people who are Feldenkrais and Alexander technique for musicians. They've been doing it. It's not like it, it's not like it doesn't exist, but we're just now getting to the point where people like Angela and I, and like you were talking about it, and we've got Rusty who does it, and people in our upcoming interviews are also professionals now in this field where we're cross-applying this stuff. This is new. It is changing. It is starting to be accepted, which is a big deal, because when I first got injured, it was not accepted. It was, you have to hide this. And I was shied away from, like, oh, you shouldn't do strength. You shouldn't pick up anything. And I'm like, well, it was the opposite of what I needed. I would go ahead.
The arts are the only sector that we tell people not to be like lifters, which is so strange. Like, have you ever noticed that?
Doesn't make any sense to me.
When you pan out, it's like, well, you shouldn't. It's like, why?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, because you might hurt yourself. I'm like, I know a guy whose clarinet career was ended because he got in a car accident. I know people who've lost their performance careers because they were too hurt to play from playing too much or from sitting on the couch. And like, that's my diagnosis of the situation. So,
yeah.
So why, if I'm at risk anyway, why would I not do this thing that gives me at least a chance?
Ignorance, because we don't know. I mean, I had music teachers tell me the same thing. They're like, you don't need to go in the gym. I'm like, excuse me, why not? I like it. And they're like, you could hurt yourself. I'm like, I could hurt myself doing anything. Well, you could crush your fingers. I could do that if I decide to learn how to change the oil on the car. You got to know what is an acceptable, what's acceptable risk.
Yeah.
And you got to weigh that against what are the benefits. Yeah. And at that point, nobody knew the benefits. I mean, I've been doing Music Strong for a decade now. And it was novelty then. People still think it's novelty. It's not novelty. It's just no one else doing it. You can't figure out why.
Or we're kind of put on the sidelines. I'm sorry, Chase, you keep getting interrupted. Go ahead.
No, put on the side. That's a great point. Put on the sidelines as what?
Novelty or insane. I get a lot of like, oh, you're just like, holy crap, like you're exceptional. I'm like, when I started, I could not, empty-handed, holding onto a post, so nothing in my hands, I could not get into the bottom of a deadlift position. I was physically incapable. Wow. We're not talking weighted.
Now you're power lifted.
Strong woman, yeah. Yeah. So not to correct you, but to correct you.
My nomenclature, because you got to use the appropriate lexicon. You can't be like, oh, you do this when you actually do that. So strong about it.
Yeah.
And most of my injuries came from muscle imbalances that were created because when you're a hypermobile person, I'm not the most hypermobile person, believe me, but when you do have hypermobility and extensive range of motion in joints, like this kind of business, you shouldn't be able to like, you should be like here. And I'm like, where? When you go that far, like my neck shouldn't go that far kind of thing. When you have that, your body is going to find a direction, like it's going to crave strength, it's going to crave stability. And when you don't have it, it's going to create it the best way it can. And my second and third injuries were because of muscle compensations from playing the flute, trying to lift weights, not knowing what I was doing, not knowing what good form was. And I just exacerbated the muscle compensation and tore things. I didn't know what I was doing.
What I was going to originally say a couple minutes ago ties in perfectly to this. My first trainer, his career, and he trained me off the books. We were just good friends, and he's a mix engineer in LA, and he came to live here in Nashville. Like 35 years old, shredded, unbelievably strong, baseball player through college, football player, about 5'9", about my size. He could kind of relate to that, and he would always talk about, he's like, I would love to write a fitness program for guys behind the desk. Like, you look at all the unhealthy like
Mhm.
producers that like the unhealthy mix engineers that are out there just like fumbling with the plugins just in the box right there every day.
Mhm.
And we were just kind of talking for a few, I mean, obviously we haven't moved on such project, but like we were always kind of talking like these guys and girls like need that information to go, hey, you don't have to be in there being, Arnold. You're not trying to be a bodybuilder.
Yeah.
You need to get your strength up. So when you're at the desk sitting in your Herman Miller chair, you can sit up straight and keep your neck long, Alexander technique, right? Rise, all that stuff. And it's just such a funny thing to me that the arts are the only sector that we tell people maybe you shouldn't go in the gym. Like, you don't tell that to like an account manager at Ernst & Young. Like,
Actually,
you can do what they want. It's like, what be the strongest guy at the accounting firm? What's that going to do for you?
yeah. There's certainly less judgment, but what I find interesting, and I am going to apologize, I'm going to have to go in like 1 minute here. But what I find interesting is now I'm hearing stories from people so I work part-time in an office, and my fiance is definitely in an office, and you're hearing stories now of like, oh, well, my hip hurts and my doctor said to stay out of the gym. My doctor said, oh, I should just rest. I'm like, your hip hurts because you're sitting 12 hours a day. So it's starting to transfer now into private sector. You don't get judged as much as you do in arts, but man, if you're in private sector and watching this, you gotta be paying attention to that. It's starting to travel.
All around.
Oh yeah.
Right. So I think we have to call it. We could probably talk for a lot longer.
Yeah.
It's been a fantastic conversation, but Jen has to run.
Yeah, I do. I'm so sorry.
We've been talking for almost 90 minutes, so that's pretty impressive. Yeah, I know it flew by. It's gonna be fun to try to re-listen to this and find a clip. Oops. Okay. If anybody knows of like a timekeeper thing that, an app or something, let me know. So I don't have to use like a stopwatch.
For my podcast.
Oh, we were going to say that. So we've got plugs. We need to tell people where they can find you and talk about your podcast real quick.
That's okay. Jen, if you need to go, we can finish up because I know you have a heart out.
I do, and I'm sorry about that. So yeah, thanks for chatting with us. Enjoy the rest of your plugs. Hopefully we can actually talk again soon because this was really awesome. So
let's do it again.
All right. Cool. Bye everyone.
Bye, Jen.
Awesome.
So go ahead.
We covered 90 minutes. That kind of flew by. That was
really did.
So you can find me on personal Instagram is at Chase Akers, and Akers is spelled Akers. There's the fitness page, which is Rebuilding Ability, no underscore or anything. Chase Akers, I post podcast updates, music updates, anything I'm working on. Any business ventures like that. Rebuilding Ability is mostly geared towards the WordPress now that I've been publishing writing material through there, just kind of telling the stories and trying to form these things into a long narrative. A lot of stuff we talked about today. My podcast is called Mr. Encyclopedia, and that airs bi-weekly, every other Friday. I talk with local musicians and friends of mine who've made their own way in the music industry, and we just dissect things that we like. We tell some war stories and talk about where we're going. So that's a long format podcast. You can find it most easily on Spotify under Chase Akers Presents Mr. Encyclopedia. A lot of fun.
Outstanding. Yeah, you've got a whole lot of platforms people can read, and you started a blog, right?
Yeah. That's the blog is rebuildingability.com.
Outstanding. Chase, this has been a fantastic conversation. I cannot believe it flew by so fast. I feel like we just touched like the tip of the iceberg of the things we could talk about.
I know. Well, maybe we can do another one, a part 2 at some point. We dive deeper on any sort of, if you listen back and find something, I want to talk more about that. Maybe we can do like another short form one or something that we can dive deep. But thank you.
I think that'd be great. And thank you so much for, for taking the time to come and join us. This is a fantastic conversation, like I said. And you really run the gamut from, in a lot of areas of your life. So thank you for sharing those with us. And I'm going to make a blog post myself with some show notes because I'm starting to get into that. And you can find all my stuff at musicstrong.com, everything Music Strong, Facebook, Instagram, etc. It's all Music Strong. Perfect. And this will go up on our YouTube playlist pretty quickly, but you can also find us wherever you get your podcast. And that also is currently dropping bi-weekly on Tuesdays. So thank you again for joining us. And we will see you later.
All right. Thanks, Angela.